Fascinating. Eyes, I mean. As is, of course, the whole business of seeing. But while eyes are necessary in order for us to see, they aren't sufficient. Don't get me wrong. It's really important that we have healthy eyes that produce a clearly focused image at the back of the eye on the retina. But that then, of course, produces a tsunami of electrical impulses that make their way down the optic nerves, down the visual pathway, into central visual processing structures in the brain, beginning back here at what we call occipital cortex. And it's the combination of that clear image resolved by the eye as an optical system and the processing that then goes on inside our heads that gives rise to our experience of seeing. So in a sense, we don't see with our eyes, we see with our brain. And this is sort of illustrated by something that appeared in the media recently. I don't know if you saw, but just a couple of weeks ago, the Duchess of Sussex sat Archie on her knee. It was his first birthday, and as a treat, she read to him from a book called Duck Rabbit. This was recorded as a video in support of Save the Children. It's available online. You can have a look at it yourself. That book, Duck Rabbit, is based on a famous illustration from the 19th century called, not surprisingly, Duck Rabbit. Here's a version of it, simple version, just a pen drawing. And the reason this is interesting is it's one of these visual stimuli that is what we call bistable. It gives rise to a bistable perception or visual experience. And what that means is that you can actually see either a duck or a rabbit. And interestingly, you can only really see either one or the other. It's actually very difficult to see both together or see some kind of intermediate stimulus. And so here we have the same information falling on the back of the eye, but leading to quite distinct visual experiences. Now, what determines whether you see a duck or a rabbit? Well, it's clearly then not just the information collected by your eyes. There was an interesting experiment done with children. If you show children this illustration round about Easter time, it turns out that they are much more likely to say rabbit rather than duck. And the reason for that is, of course, there is an association between Easter and rabbits, the Easter bunny and so on. And just that nugget of information sitting in a child's head is enough to bias their perception so they're more likely to see and therefore report a rabbit rather than a duck. And that's because all that information flowing out of our eyes into our visual system needs to be processed and interpreted, and it's that gives rise to a visual experience. And critical to that interpretation is lots of information that comes from other places beyond our eyes: memory, experience, cognitive biases, all sorts of things. That's why two people can look at the same thing and, in a sense, see very different things. There are, of course, other famous images that work in this way. Here's another one, the Necker cube. So a two-dimensional representation of a 3D cube. And most people can see this in one of two ways, and many people, as with duck and rabbit, can flip between them at will. But again, even although this one visual stimulus is always producing the same information on your retina at the back of your eye, it's leading to quite distinct visual experiences. Stimuli like this are really interesting and help us to tease out what goes on with this thing that we call seeing. As well as these bistable kind of stimuli, we have a whole other class of stimuli called, of course, visual illusions. Again, you'll find lots of these online, well worth having an explore through them. Visual illusions are slightly different, though, to these bistable images, in as much as visual illusions give rise to stable perceptions. It's just that those perceptions are wrong. In other words, they lead to misperceptions about what's out there in the visual world. Here's an example, famous example, the Muller-Lyer illusion. This causes a bias in your perception of the length of, in this case, horizontal line elements by using these little arrow symbols. And you'll see that one of the lines looks longer than the other line. By line, I mean here that horizontal connection between the little arrows. Now, interestingly here, even if I tell you that both line segments are exactly the same length, you still will get that perception of them being different. And even if I then show you that, as here, again, the illusion still manages to bleed through for most people. Well, interestingly, again, it doesn't work quite the same way in everyone, and there's good evidence for this particular illusion that if you show it to different cultural groups, it works much more strongly on some groups than others. In fact, Western Europeans are one of the groups that seem to report much bigger effects than many other cultural groups. These kind of investigations shows that the business of seeing is both very important to us and also really difficult to accomplish. It takes, yes, healthy eyes and all that that means, and there's many of my colleagues in Liverpool working hard to keep eyes healthy. But it takes healthy eyes and healthy brains working together to give rise to that amazing experience that we call seeing.